I drove 3 hours to help my ex-wife's younger sister move out of her apartment, and I still can't fully explain why I said yes. My name is Kevin Doyle. I'm 38 years old. I work in commercial HVAC, installation, maintenance, the kind of job where you show up early and leave smelling like metal and duct tape. I own a truck, a decent set of tools, and enough muscle memory from moving furniture that people call me before they call a moving company. That's probably the most honest explanation I have for how that Saturday in October started. Her name was Lily. Lily Crane, 26 years old, fresh out of a 3-year relationship of her own, moving from her apartment in Columbus into a smaller place closer to her job in Dublin. She called me on a Wednesday night and I almost let it go to voicemail. The number wasn't saved in my phone anymore. I'd deleted it, along with most things connected to that chapter of my life about 14 months earlier. But I picked up. Kevin? Her voice was the same, a little quieter than I remembered. I'm sorry to bother you. I didn't know who else to call. My car's in the shop. Brendan moved to Denver, and the guys from my office are useless. I have a couch. It's a sectional. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a second. What time Saturday? That should have been the end of the thought process. It wasn't. Here's the part I told myself not to think about too hard. Lily's older sister was my ex-wife, Claire Crane. We'd been married for 4 years, separated for 1, divorced for another. No kids, no house. We rented. The split was civil enough on paper and quietly devastating in every other way. Claire had decided, somewhere around our 3rd year, that she'd made a mistake. Not a cruel conclusion, just an honest one she'd held on to too long before saying it out loud. By the time she did, I think I already knew. We were both just waiting for whoever would say it first. She said it first. So when Lily called, the smart thing would have been to politely decline, wish her luck, and hang up. The thing I actually did was show up at her apartment at 8 in the morning, with a furniture dolly, 2 coffees, and a box of granola bars. Lily met me at the door in a gray sweatshirt and leggings, her dark hair pulled back, looking like she hadn't slept well. She handed me one of those handwritten lists, things to load first, things to wrap, things to leave for last, and I realized this was the most organized move I'd ever been part of. She'd labeled every box, color-coded by room. She'd even taped a layout diagram of her new place to the inside of the front door. You did all this last night? I asked. I couldn't sleep, she said. Organizing helps. We worked for a while without talking much, which was fine. I've always been comfortable with silence. Lily less so, I think, but she seemed to be making peace with it that morning. We carried boxes, wrapped mirrors in moving blankets, broke down her bed frame. She had good taste in furniture, real wood, clean lines, the kind of stuff that's heavy because it's actual quality and not just cheap particle board. Around 10, she disappeared into the closet in her bedroom and came out holding a shoebox. She set it on the windowsill while she worked on something else and it tipped over, spilling the contents across the floor. Letters, cards, a few photographs, and a stack of postcards bound with a rubber band. I picked up a couple of the postcards to stack them back. Portland, Seattle, a few from places in New England I didn't recognize. All addressed to Lily, all postmarked within the last 2 years. Sorry, I said, setting them back in the box. It's fine. She picked up the box and closed the lid without looking at me. Old stuff. I didn't ask, but I noticed that her hands weren't quite steady when she put the lid back on. We finished loading the truck around noon. The new apartment was in a 2-story building off Emerald Parkway, the kind of complex with a decent gym and a gate that you have to punch a code into. Nice area. Quiet, a step up from where she'd been living, even if it was technically smaller square footage. The sectional was the worst part. It always is. We had to angle it through the stairwell doorway, rest it on the landing, reposition, swear a little, and then finally coax it through the living room door. Lily was stronger than she looked. She didn't complain once, just kept adjusting her grip and following my lead until we got it in place. By 2 o'clock we had everything inside. Lily ordered pizza, pepperoni, which I'd forgotten was my preference, and we sat on the floor of her half-assembled living room eating out of the box. You didn't have to do this, she said. I know. I mean it. After everything with Claire, I would have understood if you just... Lily. She looked up. The pizza's getting cold. She smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her all day, and it caught me off guard. Not because it was dramatic or stunning, just because it was tired and genuine at the same time, the kind of smile that doesn't have anything to perform. We talked more after that. Easier things. She asked about work and I told her about a commercial job we'd just finished in Westerville, a 3-story medical building with a ventilation situation that had taken 2 weeks to figure out. She laughed when I described it. She'd always been a good listener, even back when I knew her as just Claire's little sister, the one who showed up at holidays and asked thoughtful questions, and then went quiet for long stretches while everyone else filled the room with noise. She asked me about dating. I told her it was going fine, which was partially true. I'd been on a few dates in the past year. Nothing that went anywhere. I wasn't sure if that was circumstance or something I was doing, consciously or not, to keep things from going anywhere. She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. "What about you?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I was seeing someone. For about 2 years, it ended in the spring." She picked a piece of pepperoni off her slice and set it aside. "He was in Portland for a while for work. That's what the postcards were." I didn't say anything. "It wasn't bad," she said. "It was just, I kept waiting for it to feel like enough, and it never quite did." I understood that feeling more than I probably should have. I helped her set up the bed frame in the bedroom and moved a few boxes to the right rooms so she'd at least know where things were when she unpacked later. She walked me to the door and we stood there for a second the way people do when neither one is sure how to end the conversation. "Thank you, Kevin," she said. "Seriously, anytime." She tilted her head a little. "Why did you say yes?" I thought about it. The honest answer was that I'd asked myself the same question 2 or 3 times since Wednesday. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe I just wanted to." She looked at me for a moment, and I couldn't read her expression completely. Something in it was careful, like she was deciding whether to say something. She didn't. She just nodded and said goodbye. I drove home with the windows down, even though it was cold. I wasn't sure what I was trying to clear out of my head exactly. I just knew there was something there that needed air. I didn't hear from Lily for 2 weeks after that. Then she texted me a photo. It was her living room, fully unpacked, the sectional positioned under a big window with a plant on the sill and a throw blanket folded over the arm. It looked like a real home. "Finally looks like a place," she wrote. "Good plant choice, it's fake. I kill real ones." I laughed out loud alone in my truck in the parking lot of a job site in Gahanna. That was maybe the first time in a while I'd laughed at something on my phone without it feeling like I was performing. We started texting more after that. Nothing major. She'd send me something she found funny, a tweet, a weird news story, a photo of something she'd found while unpacking that she couldn't remember buying. I'd respond. She'd respond. It was easy in a way that I'd mostly forgotten conversations could be. I want to be clear about something, because it matters for understanding everything that came after. I wasn't trying to make anything happen. I was 38 years old, 2 years out of a marriage, with enough self-awareness to know that the absolute last thing I needed was to develop feelings for my ex-wife's younger sister. I knew that. I was aware of it as a logical fact the same way I'm aware of the weight limits on certain roof structures. It was information I held on to. Holding on to information and acting on it aren't always the same thing. About 3 weeks after the move, Lily asked if I wanted to get coffee. "Just coffee," she said, like she was making a point of not calling it anything else. There was a place near her office in Dublin. She knew the baristas. The parking was easy. I said sure. We met on a Tuesday morning before I had to be on a job site in Powell. She was already there when I arrived, holding a ceramic mug, wearing a dark green jacket that looked good against her complexion. She waved when she saw me and there was something almost shy in it, which surprised me because Lily had never struck me as shy before. We talked for an hour, maybe more, about her job. She worked in insurance underwriting, which sounds dry, but the way she explained it made it interesting. All these decisions about risk and probability. About my work, the parts I actually liked, which are the mechanical puzzle aspects of it, the diagnosing and the problem solving. About Columbus, and how she'd lived here her whole life but sometimes felt like she was still figuring out which parts of it actually suited her. She didn't bring up Claire. I didn't either. At some point she asked me what I'd wanted, back when I was younger, before the marriage and the job and everything that had calcified into the shape of my current life. "Wanted to do what?" I asked. "Just wanted. Like dreamed about." I thought about it. "I wanted to build things," I said. "Not fix them, build them." I had this idea in my 20s about starting a custom fabrication shop. Metal and wood, architectural pieces, furniture, stuff that was both functional and, I don't know, beautiful, I guess. That word sounds weird coming out of my mouth. "It doesn't," she said. "I still have the notebooks, sketches, plans I made before HVAC became the practical answer." She was looking at me in that careful way she had, like she was paying very close attention. "Why didn't you do it?" "Life," I said. The usual reasons: rent, then the relationship, then the marriage. The safe path felt safer. Do you regret it? Some days, she nodded slowly. I think some days is honest. I don't trust people who say they have no regrets. We left when the coffee shop started filling up with the lunch crowd. We walked to our cars, which happened to be parked near each other, and she stopped at her driver's side door and looked at me. I'm glad you picked up the phone, she said. Yeah, I said. Me too. I drove to Powell thinking about the notebooks. I hadn't thought about them in years. I want to tell you that what happened next was simple and uncomplicated. It wasn't. I'd gotten a call from a number I recognized. Claire, we hadn't talked much since the divorce was finalized. The occasional logistical thing early on, figuring out who kept what, forwarding mail, the quiet bureaucratic unwinding of a shared life. But in the last 6 or 7 months, essentially nothing. I picked up because I'm not the kind of person who avoids things. Hey, she said. Hey. A pause. I heard you helped Lily move. I did. That was nice of you. She needed help, I said. I have a truck. Another pause. Longer. I could hear her thinking, which was something I'd learned to recognize over 4 years. The way she got quiet right before she said something she'd been preparing. Are you two spending time together? She asked. I stayed with the question for a second. We got coffee. I need to know if there's something going on, because she's my sister, and you're my... She stopped. You were my husband. I know what I was. This would be weird, she said. You have to see that this would be very weird. I sat down on the tailgate of my truck. It was cold. I could see my breath. Claire, with respect, we've been divorced for 2 years. You were the one who ended it. I'm not trying to rehash that. It is what it is, but I need you to understand that what I do with my time isn't something you get to weigh in on. She's my sister, and she's a grown adult woman. That's not. She exhaled. I'm not trying to control anything. I'm asking you to think about this. About what this does to the family dynamic, to the holidays, to Claire, I said. Nothing's going. We had coffee. But even if something were going on, that would be between me and Lily, not me and you. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. I need you to stay away from her, she said. Her voice was flatter then. Something underneath the concern that was harder to name. I'm going to pretend you didn't say that, I said. Kevin, I'll talk to you later, Claire. I hung up and sat on the tailgate for another 10 minutes, not going anywhere. The afternoon light was doing something specific to the tree line across the street, turning the remaining leaves copper and gold, and I focused on that for a while instead of thinking about what I was feeling, which was complicated enough that I didn't have the vocabulary for it yet. I called Lily that evening. Not to report what had happened. That felt wrong, like I was pulling her into a version of this she didn't need. I just called to talk. We talked for an hour. She told me about a claim she'd been working on, a weird circumstance involving a flood and a property line dispute in Pickerington that had taken on an almost comic level of complexity. I told her about the job in Powell, a restaurant build-out with a grease trap situation that had caused problems. We laughed about our respective disasters. Before we got off the phone, she went quiet for a second. Kevin, she said. Yeah, I don't want to make anything complicated for you, you're not. My sister is handling her own feelings, I said. That's not your job. Another silence. Then, okay, I said, but I could hear something in her voice that hadn't settled, and I understood it because I had the same thing. We met again the following Saturday. She'd found a hardware store on the east side that carried some reclaimed wood she thought I might like, based on what I'd told her about the notebooks. She'd texted me the address with no explanation, just thought you might want to check this out. We spent 2 hours in that store. She stood next to me while I ran my hand along the edge of a piece of white oak that had come out of a barn somewhere in Knox County. And she asked questions, the right ones, specific ones, about what I would do with something like that. I told her about a bench I'd sketched out for years. She asked dimensions, asked about the joinery I had in mind, asked whether I'd ever thought about the finish. No one had ever asked me about the finish. She found a small piece of reclaimed walnut near the back, 4 inches wide and maybe a foot long, and bought it without telling me why. In the parking lot, she handed it to me. For the notebooks, she said. Start small. I stood there holding this small piece of walnut in both hands and I didn't know what to say. So I said what was true. Why are you being so good to me? She looked at me steadily. The October light was thin and cool, and she'd pulled her jacket tighter, and she just looked at me the way she'd been looking at me since the day I showed up with a furniture dolly and 2 coffees. Because I think someone should have been, a long time ago, she said. And because I'm tired of pretending I don't think about you the way I do. The parking lot was quiet. A car went by on the street. I could hear it clearly because everything else had gone silent in a way that wasn't about sound. "I'm your ex-wife's ex-husband," I said. Like she'd forgotten. "I know exactly who you are," she said. "This is complicated." "Yes, Claire already." I stopped. "She called me." Lily's expression shifted. Not surprise, something more like she'd been waiting for that information. "What did she say?" "She told me to stay away from you." Lily looked out at the street for a moment. Then she looked back at me. "That's not her call to make," she said quietly. "She left you. She's been in a relationship with someone new for over a year. Whatever she's feeling right now, it's not about love, Kevin. It's about control. And I'm not willing to manage my life around that." I was quiet. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now," she said. "I'm just telling you where I stand, so you know." I turned the piece of walnut over in my hands, and smooth on one side, rough on the other, the grain visible even in the flat afternoon light. "I'm going to think about it," I said. I did think about it, for days. I thought about Claire, and what she'd asked, and why she'd asked it. I thought about whether I was doing something that was genuinely wrong, or something that only felt wrong because it was unfamiliar. I thought about the 4 years of a marriage, and what they'd cost, both of us, and whether it was healthy or destructive to let that cost determine the next chapter of my life. I thought about the notebooks. I thought about a woman who'd walked through a hardware store, asking me about the finish on a piece of wood. I called Claire first, not asking permission but being honest. We talked for almost 40 minutes. It was hard. She said things that were painful to hear, some of which were fair, and some of which weren't. I let her say them. At the end, I told her that I cared about what she was feeling, that I understood it was strange and uncomfortable, and that I couldn't let that be the thing that decided my choices. She was quiet. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just said she needed time to process it, and I said that was reasonable, and we hung up. I sat with that for a long time. "Then I free this week? I'd like to have dinner. Not coffee. Dinner." 3 dots appeared. "Thursday," she wrote. "There's a place in Grandview you'd like. Good wood on the walls." I smiled at that. Smiled in the way you do when something lands exactly where you needed it to land. Thursday, I wrote back. "We went to dinner on Thursday. The place had exposed timber ceiling beams, thick and dark, probably original to the building, and she'd been right that I'd like it. We sat in a booth near the window and split a bottle of Malbec and talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Her childhood versus mine, the mechanics of risk assessment in insurance and in construction, a documentary about woodworkers she'd watched and bookmarked to tell me about, the specific sound a well-hung door makes when it closes. At some point she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I didn't pull away. "I want to say something and I need you to hear it without deflecting," she said. "Okay, I'm not a consolation prize. I'm not a placeholder. I'm not someone you're turning to because the thing you actually wanted didn't work out." She held my gaze. "I've been watching you since long before any of this. Long before Claire left. I was just someone in the background who knew better than to say anything. And then life happened, and then time happened, and now we're here." She paused. "I'm not telling you this to pressure you. I'm telling you because I think you deserve to know that what I feel is real, and it's been real for a long time. You get to decide what to do with that." I looked at her for a moment. The restaurant noise was there but distant, like it was behind glass. "I've been building things my whole life," I said. "Houses, systems, infrastructure, things that hold other things up." I turned my hand over under hers. "I think I'd like to try building something for myself for once." She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We closed out the tab and walked to our cars the long way. Through the Grandview streetlights, the October air finally sharp enough that our breath fogged a little. She looped her arm through mine without asking, and I didn't comment on it, just adjusted my pace to match hers. At some point she said, "My sister is going to be difficult about this. Probably, holidays are going to be interesting. We'll figure it out. You're not scared?" I thought about it honestly. "I'm a little scared," I said, "but I think I've spent enough years doing the thing that felt safe." Safe didn't make me happy. It made me comfortable, and then it ended anyway. I looked at her. "I'd rather try something real." She leaned her head against my shoulder for a second as we walked. "That's the most words you've said at once the entire time I've known you." "Don't get used to it," I said. She laughed. Actually laughed, bright and unguarded, the kind that doesn't care who hears it. I held on to that sound on the drive home. Kept it in my head like something I didn't want to lose before I got a chance to understand what it meant. I still have the piece of walnut on my workbench. I've been drawing plans around it. A small shelf, nothing complicated, something to start with. That's usually how the best things begin, not with a grand design, but with a small piece of something good, and the decision to see what you can build.